Chicago-Midway International Airport is an international airport on the southwest side of Chicago, Illinois, 8 miles from the Loop. Dominated by low-cost carrier Southwest Airlines, Midway is the Dallas-based carrier's largest focus city. As of 2013, both the Stevenson Expressway and the Chicago Transit Authority's Orange Line provide passengers access to downtown Chicago. Midway Airport is the second largest passenger airport in the Chicago metropolitan area, as well as the state of Illinois, after O'Hare International Airport on the northwest side. Early history. Originally named Chicago Airpark, Midway Airport was built on a 320-acre plot in 1923 with one cinder runway mainly for airmail flights. In 1926 the city leased the airport and named it Chicago Municipal Airport on December 12, 1927. By 1928, the airport had 12 hangars and 4 runways, lit for night operations. A major fire early on June 25, 1930, destroyed 2 hangars and 27 aircraft, 12 of them tri-motor passenger planes. The loss was estimated at more than $2 million. The hangars destroyed were the Universal Airlines Inc. and the Grey Goose Airlines, the latter under lease to Stout Airlines. The fire followed an explosion of undetermined cause in the Universal hangar. In 1931 a new passenger terminal opened at 62nd Street. The following year the airport claimed to be the world's busiest with over 100,846 passengers, on 60,947 flights. More construction was funded in part by $1 million from the Works Progress Administration. The airport expanded to fill the square mile in 1938-41, after a court ordered the Chicago and Western Indiana Railroad to reroute tracks that had crossed the square along the northern edge of the older field. The March 1939 OAK shows 47 weekday departures, 13 on United, 13 American, 90 WF4 Northwest, and 2 each on Eastern, Braniff, Pennsylvania Central, and C-in-Amp-S. New York's airport was then the busiest airline airport in the United States, but Midway passed LaGuardia in 1948 and kept the title until 1960. The record-breaking 1945 Japan-Washington flight of B-29s refueled at the airport on the way to Washington, D.C. In July 1949 the airport was renamed after the Battle of Midway. That year Midway saw 3.2 million passengers. Passengers peaked to 10 million in 1959. The diagram on the January 1951 C-in-Amp-GS approach chart shows 4 parallel pairs of runways, all 4,240 feet or less except for 5,730 FD runway 13R and 5,230 FD runway 4R. The April 1957 OAK shows 414 weekday fixed-wing departures from Midway, 83 American, 83 United, 56 DW at 40 Capital, 35 North Central, 28 Delta, 27 Eastern, 22 Northwest, 19 Ozark, 11 Braniff, 5 TransCanada, and 5 Leg Central. Air France, Lufthansa, and Rail had a few flights per week. Midway was running out of room and in any case could not handle the 707 and DC-8 jets that appeared in 1959. Every Chicago jet flight had to use O'Hare, which had opened to the airlines in 1955. Electors and Viscounts could have continued to fly out of Midway, But O'Hare's capacious new terminal opened in 1962, allowing airlines to consolidate the flights. From July 1962 until the 727 appeared in July 1964, Midway's only scheduled airline was Chicago Helicopter. In August 1966, a total of 4 fixed-wing arrivals were scheduled, all United 727s. Post-O'Hare reconstruction. By 1967, reconstruction began at the airport, adding 3 new concourses with 28 gates and 3 ticket counters. And in 1968, the city invested $10 million in renovation funds. The funds partly supported construction of the Stevenson Expressway, and Midway saw the return of major airlines that year, with 1,663,074 passengers on jets such as the McDonnell Douglas DC-9, BAC-111, Boeing 727, and Boeing 737 that could use Midway's runways, which the Boeing 707 and Douglas DC-8 could not. In the early 1970s, in addition to airlines that served both O'Hare and Midway, several airlines flew only to Midway Airport in Chicago. These were Mohawk, Piedmont, Northeast, Frontier and Southern. In 1979, Midway Airlines began operations, the first to do so after the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. It ended operations in 1991. Midway Airlines helped to revitalize the airport and lead the way for other discount carriers, who benefited from Midway's lower costs and proximity to Chicago's Loop. Southwest Airlines, which began operations at Midway in 1985, was one such beneficiary. 3 years earlier, in 1982, the city of Chicago purchased Midway Airport from the Chicago Board of Education for $16 million. The Chicago Transit Authority displaced the Carlton Midway Inn to open a new CTA terminal at the airport on October 31, 1993. For the new Chicago L Orange Line that connected Midway to Chicago's Loop. Midway Airport is the end of the line, which crosses the southwest part of the city before ending at the Loop. The Orange Line does not run 24 hours a day, but does operate from about 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. at an average of 8-minute intervals. The trip from Midway to the Loop takes 25 minutes. Years of Arthur. In 1996, after failing to get his Les Calumet Airport and having received harsh criticism for the idea of turning the airport into an industrial park, Chicago Mayor Richard M. Daley announced the Midway Airport Terminal Development Program, which was launched the following year. At the time, it was the largest public works project in the state. The Midway Airport parking garage opened in 1999, bringing covered parking to the airport for the first time. The garage is connected to the Midway Terminal building for convenient access to ticket counters and baggage claim areas. Continuing with the expansion project, a pedestrian bridge over Cicero Avenue was built in 2000, connecting the new terminal to the new concourses. In 2001, the new 900,000-square-foot Midway Airport Terminal building opened with larger ticket counters, spacious baggage claim areas, traveler information, and a short walking distance to gates. A 50,000-square-foot food court opened with Chicago-style food and retail options. The expansion project culminated with a short-lived period of great airline diversity at Midway as Vanguard Airlines, National Airlines and Airtran Airways all expanded the services to the airport. ARTA took over Chicago Express Airlines, also known as ARTA Connect, whose primary hub was at Midway. Chicago Chicago Express served as a regional airline connecting to airports around the Great Lakes regions. Following the September 11 attacks, which resulted in a drop in passenger service, along with other problems for the airline industry, both Vanguard and National ceased operations at Midway and became defunct in 2002, with Metrojet being dissolved and refolded into U.S. Airways mainline in late 2001. In 2002, Midway welcomed the return of international service after a 40-year absence with the opening of the new Federal Inspection Service facility in Concourse A in June 2004. Medallion airline officials celebrated the completion of the Terminal Development Program. The project, designed by HNTB, resulted in the addition of 14 gates, with the airport now having 43 gates on 3 concourses, a new 6,300 space economy parking garage, including a new bridge and roadway for buses shuttling passengers to and from the terminal, opened in December 2005. Simultaneous to Midway's expansion, ATA Airlines began rapid expansion at Midway in the early 2000s, and was the airport's dominant carrier prior to 2004, using 14 of the 17 gates in Concourse A. However, after the airline declared bankruptcy in October 2004, scheduled service from Midway significantly decreased. For over 16 years, Midway had been the main hub for Indianapolis-based ATA, but the airline shut down on June 7, 2008. Earlier, the airline filed for bankruptcy in April 2008. On April 3, 2008, ATA Airlines discontinued all operations. In November 2008, Porter Airlines, which flies between Midway and Toronto, Canada, was the only international route served from Chicago Midway after ATA Airlines, which had flights to Mexico, ceased operations in April that year. On December 13, 2010, a second carrier, Volaris, began flights between Guadalajara and Midway. Rapid Southwest expansion starting in early 2009, a construction project added a new walkway and food court to Concourse A. The project also connected gates A4A and A4B to the main A concourse. Expansions were completed in the spring of 2010. Chicago has considered privatizing the airport, but the deals fell through in 2009 and 2013. On April 20, 2009, a $2.5 billion deal to privatize the airport via a 99-year lease fell through when the consortium could not put together financing. The city is to keep $125 million in the down payment. The consortium, operating under the name of Midway Investment and Development Company LLC, consisted of Vancouver Airport Services, City Infrastructure Investors, and Boston's John Hancock Life Insurance. It was awarded the contract in October 2008 by the City Council, which voted 49-0 to approve it. The consortium would have operated the airport and collected airport parking, concession, and passenger facility charges. However, Chicago would have continued to provide fire and police services. Chicago privatized the Chicago Skyway in 2007. In 2010, a new slogan emerged calling the airport the busiest square mile in the world. In September 2013, Mayor Rahm Emanuel terminated negotiations to privatize the airport, noting that the process was no longer competitive after one of the 2 finalists had backed out. The one remaining was Great Lakes Airport Alliance, a partnership of Macquarie Infrastructure and Real Assets and Ferrovial. Macquarie was one of the investors in the Chicago Skyway. The group that had backed out was a group that included the Australia-based Industry Funds Management and Manchester Airports Group. The Great Lakes proposal had been valued at $2 billion and would have involved a 40-year lease. Airfield field. All terminals and hangars were on the square periphery. By the late 1970s, the north, south and east-west runway pairs had been closed, though some were converted to taxiways. The other 4 runways remain in use, all strengthened and enhanced, but about the same lengths as always. A short runway for light aircraft was added in 1989. Chicago Midway International Airport covers 1 square mile, and currently has 5 runways. Runway 13C, 31C, 6,522 feet times 150 feet, air carrier runway, ILS equipped. Runway 4R, 22L, 6,445 feet times 150 feet, air carrier runway, ILS equipped. Runway 4L, 22R, 5,507 feet times 150 feet, general aviation and air taxi. Runway 13L, 31R, 5,141 feet times 150 feet, general aviation and air taxi, used as an emergency runway for commercial aircraft. Runway 13R, 31L, 3,859 feet times 60 feet, light aircraft only, used as an emergency runway for commercial aircraft. Because Midway is surrounded by buildings and other development, the landing thresholds of the runways are displaced to provide a proper obstacle clearance. Both the FAA and the airlines ensure safety by adhering to calculated load limits and various weather minimums. Because of the displaced landing thresholds, the runways have shorter distances available for landings than for takeoffs. 13C, 31C, the longest runway, only has an available landing distance of 6,059 feet in the southeast direction, and 5,826 feet operating to the northwest. The largest aircraft normally seen at Midway is the Boeing 757. Normally, the commercial planes only take off from and land on runways 4R, 22L, 31C, and 13C. The other runways are used by smaller aircraft terminals. The carrier transporting the most passengers from Chicago Midway Airport is Southwest Airlines. In 2008, a total of 17,340,497 passengers were carried through Meadow, a 10.52% decrease from the previous year. Also, in 2008, 253,901 aircraft passed through Midway Airport, a 16.66% decrease from 2007. Midway has 43 aircraft gates on 3 concourses. The 3 concourses and the gates are Concourse A 17 gates, Concourse B 23 gates, Concourse C 3 gates. Airlines and destinations. Statistics. Chicago Midway Airport is the second largest passenger airport in the state of Illinois, with only O'Hare being larger. In 2005, Chicago Midway International Airport was the 30th busiest airport in the United States in terms of passenger traffic. Chicago Midway ranked highest in customer satisfaction among medium-sized airports in J.D. Power and Associates 2008 study. Southwest is the dominant carrier at Midway, controlling 34 of the airport's 43 gates. Currently, the airline offers around 250 daily departures to 60 non-stop destinations. Top destinations: annual traffic, historic operations, accidents and incidents. On December 8, 1972, United Airlines Flight 553, a Boeing 737-200, crashed into a residential area outside Midway during landing. The crash of the 737-200 killed 43 of the 61 on board, and 2 on the ground. One of the victims on the plane was Dorothy Hunt, the wife of Watergate conspirator Ehud Hunt. She was carrying $10,000 in cash. James McCord alleged that she supplied the Watergate defendants with money for legal expenses. Exactly 33 years later, on December 8, 2005, Southwest Airlines Flight 1248, a Boeing 737-700 inbound from Baltimore Washington International Airport in Baltimore, Maryland, slid off the runway while attempting to land at the airport in a heavy snowstorm. The airplane broke through the barrier fence of the airport, and came to rest at the intersection of 55th Street and Central Avenue bordering the airport at its northwest corner. A 6-year-old boy was killed as a passenger in a vehicle that was struck by the plane after it skidded into the street. Source: Civil Aeronautics Board Archives, NTSB Records. Note: the runway now designated 13C, 31C was designated 13R, 31L until 1989, when a new runway 13R, 31L was built. Runways 27L and 36L have been closed since the 1970s. Transit: Midway Airport is served by the Chicago Transit Authority's L trains. Passengers can board Orange Line trains at a station in the airport terminal, which runs to downtown Chicago and the Loop. This same station doubles as a stop for many CTA bus routes that serve the surrounding areas. Midway is one of the few airports in the United States that has rapid transit train-to-terminal service.